Not against it. I'll sleep with something else.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, nice to see you. It's exciting. I love this and getting it going. You're saying. Yeah. Up to right after me.
It's all.
You're saying basically first.
Oh, it's like a.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Yes. Yes. So it's.
That's all.
How are you?
Short stop. Keep it being, right?
Great, thank you.
Well, you guys play again.
Found a lifeline that helps me get up here. Found a lifeline that helps me get up
I
here.
came in behind Commissioner Wong too.
Oh, okay. That's easy.
We don't pull any weight around. 7th to 11th floor side, and usually don't give me some trouble, but second floor, I get best.
Oh.
So.
We're gonna call this meeting to order. This is Commission on Chicago Landmarks. Today's date is Thursday, August 8th. I'm gonna do the roll call of commission members. Vice Chair, Commissioner Jacobitz.
Here.
Commissioner Fair.
Here.
Commissioner Hughes.
Present.
All right, Commissioner Ponce.
Here.
Commissioner Rubin.
Here.
Commissioner Tolliver. Present. And I'll wait for Commissioner Boatright to get back in. I am Commissioner Wong. We do have a quorum. I'd like to ask anyone wishing to make a statement on today's agenda to complete a public comment card and give the card to a member of the staff. Comment cards are available at the door. As a courtesy to other individuals wishing to offer comments, we ask that members of the general public limit your statements to 3 minutes or less. When the time comes for a public comment on the individual item on the agenda, I'll call names from the cards and ask you to come forward to the microphone and make your statement. Please state your name and interest, organization, or company you represent, if any. I do want to state that I am going to change the agenda for the record. Commissioner Boatright is present. I am going to change the agenda to do the citywide adopt a landmark right after the approval of the minutes, followed by item number 3, and item number, the wax track will go to item number 4. we do need to do the approval of the minutes. Those were included in your packages. Is there any comment on or discussion on the meeting minutes? If none, I'd like to request a motion to approve those minutes. So moved by Commissioner Tolliver, second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Hughes. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Next item up is the next item up is the citywide adopted landmark fund application for the Uptown Square District. This is located at 1050 West Wilson Avenue in Alderman Clay's ward. And Dan Kleiber, I think you're doing this, right? Jan?
Yes.
Dan?
I'm here.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. In February, we informed you of 13 projects that DPD conditionally awarded grants to from the most recent Adopt a Landmark application funding round. You may recall that each of the projects are required to come back to the Commission for a vote once their scope and budget are fully developed. One of the applicants, Double Down Development LLC, on behalf of Double Door Liquors 2.5 LLC, has finalized the budget and scope for this project located at the former Wilson Avenue Theater Building at 1050 West Wilson Avenue. Staff are recommending a $125,000 Adopt a Landmark grant as part of an overall $11.5 million rehabilitation project that will result in a new live event space home for Double Door. You probably also know that Double Door operated on Milwaukee Avenue in Wicker Park for almost 25 years. And during that time, they hosted a multitude of musical acts, including the Rolling Stones, Macy Gray, and the Smashing Pumpkins, to name just a few. And now Uptown will be their new home. For orientation, the subject building is located along West Wilson Avenue, just east of Broadway, within the Uptown community area in the 46th Ward. Moreover, it is a contributing building within the Uptown Square District, which was designated a Chicago landmark in 2016. For a little history, the development of the Uptown Square District during the first 2 decades of the 20th century transformed the intersection of Lawrence and Broadway in the city's Uptown community area from a rural crossroads to one of the region's most vibrant entertainment, business, and shopping districts. Christened Uptown by department store owner and local booster Lauren Miller in the mid-1910s, the area became known as Uptown Square by the mid-1920s. It was said that only Chicago's downtown loop rivaled Uptown Square as both an entertainment center and a commercial shopping district. And in fact, it was known as the Loop's little brother. The subject Wilson Avenue Theater Building was completed in 1909. At first, it was the home of the Standard Vaudeville Theater before becoming a bank by the 1920s. Overall, the scope of the Adopt a Landmark project includes a complete rehabilitation of the building to convert it to a live entertainment venue. The bulk of the focus is on the interior work, but there is some exterior work, of course, too, namely roof, limestone, window, as well as canopy and marquee work, primarily on the south or main facade. It should be noted that this project has been contemplated for some time now, and all of this work was reviewed and approved previously by PRC. Regarding the masonry, the work will include patching and repair of the existing limestone ornamental pieces and limestone cladding, as well as tuck pointing. In terms of the roof, the work will include removal and replacement of select areas of roofing for HVAC roof-mounted units, membrane patching of MEP penetrations, and the provision of approximately 10 clay coping tiles to be replaced or repaired at the parapet walls. And in terms of glass and glazing, the work includes removal of the existing storefront windows and glazing, installation of new aluminum clad storefront doors and hardware, installation of new aluminum clad punched opening windows at the south elevation, the provision of butt glazed glass panels in the existing openings, and the reinstallation of the existing wrought iron window grates. Putting it all together, before you is a rendering of the project upon completion. Again, as I mentioned, the project also includes the addition of the canopy and sign that you can see here. And the canopy and sign work were included in the applicant's adopt a landmark application, but that type of work, being new elements on the building, are not eligible for adopt a landmark funding. As a result, this is how we ended up with recommending funding only the remaining portions of the applicant's request, which is, of course, the masonry and the glazing that I wanted. A resolution before you to grant the adopt a landmark funds to the applicant includes an exhibit A, which outlines the scope of work and budget, which I just summarized, and which includes a $125,000 adopt a landmark grant for the overall $11.5 million project. It should be noted here also that the main contingency attached to DPD's preliminary award letter for this project was that financing be in place for the entire project. And the last piece of that financing, which is City of Chicago TIP assistance, is now in the process to be secured by the applicant. The other funding sources include an SBA loan, private sources, and of course, our $125,000 grant. This resolution, as well as the drawings, were included in your packets. Finally, the Exhibit A includes the main conditions associated with the project. In summary, the conditions are that all work must be submitted to DPD for prior review and approval. The work must be done in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. The applicant will notify staff of any undocumented conditions. The applicant will enter into an escrow agreement to assure that the project is completed and paid for in a timely manner, and that the applicant will provide to DPD the necessary documentation of the project so that staff can also give an informational overview of the project to the commission once completed. Should you vote to approve the project, the department will then enter into a written agreement with the applicant that will incorporate the resolution. Again, the project is located in the 46th ward, and Alderwoman Clay is aware of the project, and the Alderman staff indicated her support to DPD staff previously. Well, with me today to help answer any questions is Pete Bruce from the Development and Ownership Team, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Does the commission have any questions for Dan at this time? If none, I'll call for public comments. Mr. Miller.
I think I'm probably one of the few up. Thank you, Commissioner Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. Wanted to support this Adopt a Landmark Fund. This is part of 49 buildings that were part of the Uptown Square Landmark District. The city put together a number of years ago, and we're very supportive of this district. Includes great buildings like this. I think it sort of speaks to the power of landmark designation when we can see a wonderful historic building like this renovated, restored, and be so much a part of the community. The Double Door was a great institution, and it will be once again. So thank you for your support, not only on landmarking this building a number of years ago, but also for this Adopt the Landmarks grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward. I did go a little bit out of order, and I wanted to ask the applicant if they wanted to make a statement on this matter.
I just want to say, thank you to
You could state your name. And
I'm Peter Bruce, owner of the Double Door. And I just wanted to, thank the city and the Landmarks Commission and Commissioner Boatwright and for everything you guys are doing for us. And this has been a true labor of love. And I've been in there for 3.5 years, working on this building by myself. And to finally get, the funding and be able to, see an end vision of this is really exciting. And I can't thank everybody here enough.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Does the commission have any questions, Mr. Bruce? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody else has signed up to speak on this matter. I did want to note that Commissioner Talbert just informed me that the former Commissioner Marianne Smith has passed. She would have really appreciated this project. That would have been her ward. So condolences to her family, but also, just want to make that note that she really would have been excited about this addition to the uptown community. Okay, having none, I'll ask for request a motion to adopt a resolution for the citywide Adopt a Landmark Fund grant for 1050 West Wilson Avenue. Is there a motion? So moved, Commissioner Jekowitz. Second by Commissioner Boatright. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Ponce,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The next item up on the agenda is a preliminary decision on permit application for demolition pursuant to 2-120-740 through 2-120-825 of the municipal codes. This is in the Motor Road District, the property located at 2347 South Michigan Avenue in the 3rd Ward. And Emily, I think this is yours.
Yes. All right. The building at 2347 South Michigan Avenue is a 2-story brick and terracotta clad commercial building in the core of the Motor Road District. The building was constructed in 1910 as a showroom for the Fiat Automobile Company by architects Hollywood and Roche. Building is listed as contributing in the Motor Road Designation Building Catalog and is also listed as a contributing structure to the Motor Road National Register District. On July 12, 2024, Historic Preservation staff received an application for demolition of the structure and issued corrections. The owner, who purchased the property in 2021, received a letter from the Department of Buildings to put the building in a safe condition or demolish it. The letter also notified the owner to register the vacant building, and a copy of that letter was included in your packets. Staff contacted the commissioner of the Department of Buildings and was notified in writing that the department sent notices to all vacant buildings to inform them that they need to register their vacant buildings and that the department is not looking to demolish 2347 South Michigan. Staff also conducted a site visit of the property on July 17th to look at the condition of the building from the exterior. Since the Department of Buildings has not found that the demolition of the building is necessary to remedy conditions imminently dangerous to life, health, or property, the demolition application will be presented to the Commission for review and preliminary decision pursuant to the provisions of the Landmarks Ordinance. Staff met with the owner and their attorney on July 22nd to discuss the status of the application, staff recommendation, and to outline the Commission on Chicago Landmarks review process. So in the Commission's preliminary decision for permit application pursuant to section 2-120-760 to 780 of the Municipal Code of Chicago, this review is limited to 1, whether the subject building is contributing to the landmark district, and 2, whether the proposed work would be an adverse effect on the significant historical or architectural features. This is a preliminary designation or preliminary determination only, triggering further review by the Commission. Issues regarding the code enforcement proceedings, hardship issues, etc., are outside the scope of the Commission's review as a part of this preliminary decision. So section G4 of the rules and regulations lists 6 criteria that shall be considered in determining whether a property contributes to the character of a landmark district. And now I'll go through these one by one. The first criterion is that the subject property exhibits the significant historical or architectural features described in the designation ordinance. As described in this ordinance, the district provides an excellent illustration of the early development of the American automobile industry. The district features the largest intact collection of early automobile dealerships and related businesses in the United States. Dealerships and showrooms for most of the auto industry's earliest and most famous manufacturers are featured in the Motor Road District. The district's architecture reflects the design evolution of automobile showroom buildings from the beginning of the auto industry at the outset of the 20th century through the 1930s, when the automobile had become a standard consumer item of American culture. The buildings in the Motor Road District are consistent in their use, design, size, scale, materials, and overall detailing. And finally, that the continuous frontage or street wall formed by the groups of buildings on South Michigan Avenue between East Cermak Road and the Stevenson Expressway provides a distinctive urban streetscape for the city's near north side. So this criteria 1 being the subject property exhibits the significant historical or architectural features described in the designation ordinance. This building at 2347 South Michigan does exhibit the significant historical and architectural features described in the designation. Based on permit records, the building was constructed in 1910, well within the period of significance for the district, which was between 1905 and 1936. It was built by renowned architects Halliburton Roche as the showroom for the Fiat Auto Company. The firm designed more than a half dozen designs along the Motor Road between 1909 and 1915. No, oh, yeah. That's right. Criterion 2 is the subject property exhibits the general historic and architectural characteristics associated with the district. Motor Row is known for its elaborate brick and terracotta found on many of the contributing buildings. Per the designation report, the earliest buildings on Motor Row had quite a bit in common with stables, which were often used as garages and repair shops in the auto's earliest years. The vast majority of these so-called automobile stores were 1 to 3 stories in height with large glass showroom windows. They generally were constructed of glazed brick or enamel terracotta in tints either white or buff. The varying building designs in Motor Row are unified by their overriding use as automobile showrooms and garages. This specialized function, in turn, dictated the predominant design feature that distinguishes these buildings from other commercial buildings of the period, being a very large proportion of glass to masonry, particularly on the lower levels where the automobile display rooms were located. The subject property's primary facade along Michigan Avenue features a decorative white, buff, and green terracotta facade and an elaborate cornice, similar to the ornamental characteristics found on other masonry buildings in the district. Large storefront windows flank Michigan Avenue. The second floor served as a workshop and open space with skylights. Criterion 3. The subject property respects the general site characteristics associated with the district. The automobile-related buildings on South Michigan Avenue were constructed right up to the property lines, that is, to the edge of the sidewalk. Historically, this allowed shoppers to easily view the automobiles that were on display in the showroom windows, whether they were on foot or driving by in a streetcar or automobile. The subject property is no exception to this and is built to the front and side property lines. Criteria 4 and 5. The subject property exhibits the general size, shape, and scale associated with the district, and the materials of the subject property are compatible with the district in general color, character, and texture. The Motor Road District consists of primarily 1 to 5 story masonry buildings with tall lower floors. The subject property is 2 stories in height. This matches the general size and scale of many other buildings in the district, such as the Skillo Motor Sale Company showroom at 2317 South Michigan and the Locomobile Auburn Auto Showroom at 2401 South Michigan. The width of lots varies across the district, but there are numerous examples of similarly sized lots to the subject property, such as the Moline Auto Company showroom at 2245 South Michigan. Typical historic materials found within the district include brick, stone, and terracotta, and are all of masonry construction. The decorative treatment of Halliburton Roche's Motor Row buildings was more elaborate than those of other firms. The subject property's substantial glazing is framed by an ornate white buff and green terracotta facade with cornice. The unique mansard roof was originally clad in clay tile and sometime in the past was replaced with a standing seam metal roof. Because buildings in the districts were built from lot line to lot line, the side elevations are simple common brick with a parge coating on the south elevation. The final criterion is criterion 6, which is the subject property. If the subject property has been altered in a manner which is contrary to these criteria, such changes could be easily reversed or removed. Examples: synthetic siding, dormers, and porch enclosures can be deemed to be easily reversed or removed. While there have been several modifications to the subject property, it is largely intact. As previously discussed, the original clay tile roof has been replaced with metal, but the slope of the mansard remains. In the past, the front facade had been covered in a stucco coating that concealed much of the original ornament and masonry openings. In late 2003, the stucco was removed with very little damage to the historic terracotta beneath. A portion of the stucco remains on the northwest and southwest corners of the building on the side elevations. This portion on the north elevation originally featured another storefront window, but this has since been bricked in. This is a reversible change. The terracotta appears to remain in largely good condition. While there may have been some modifications to the original configuration of the storefront, the proportions and masonry openings on both floors match historic photos. Storefront glazing and portions of the roof have also been recently replaced. So, staff recommends that the commission find that pursuant to Article 3, Section G1 of the Rules and Regulations of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, the significant historical or architectural features of the district are all exterior building elevations, including roof lines, visible from the public rights of way. Also, preliminarily find that the subject building, a 2-story masonry commercial building constructed in 1910, contributes to the character of the district, which provides an excellent illustration of the early development of the American automobile industry and features the largest intact collection of early automobile dealerships and related businesses in the United States. Preliminarily find that the demolition of a contributing building or structure within a landmark district is a per se adverse effect on the significant historical and architectural features pursuant to Article 3, Section G3B of the Rules and Regulations. And pursuant to Section 2-120-780 of the Landmarks Ordinance, preliminarily find that the demolition of the subject property will adversely affect and destroy significant historical and architectural features of the property and the district. And finally, issue a preliminary decision disapproving the demolition application. A preliminary decision disapproving this application would trigger an informal conference. And should the informal conference not reach an accord, a public hearing on the permit application would be scheduled in accordance with the provisions of the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance. So that concludes my presentation. A letter of opposition to the demolition from the Near Source Planning Board was received just this morning, and you should have copies at your seats. And a representative from Alderman Dow's office is also here to make a statement.
Thank you, Emily. Does the commission have any questions of Emily? Yeah, go ahead.
One clarification, the letter from the Department of Buildings didn't go into much detail, but based on, the visit that the staff had, it doesn't appear that the facade is, hazardous nature. Is that a fair statement?
The terracotta appears, without doing a structural evaluation, to be in okay condition. We also have someone here though from Department of Buildings to speak on the matter. John?
Sure. So just a point of
John, if
clarification.
you could indicate your.
I'm sorry, my name is John Scott. I'm the first deputy commissioner for the Department of Buildings. And I can't comment specifically on this case because there is pending litigation. However, I can give you an overview of the process and generally how we use these 15-day letters. I'd like to say, first of all, that it's a priority of Building Commissioner Marlon Hopkins recognizes that this letter is problematic for several reasons. Its existence and origination predate both of our times here. The Department of Buildings is undergoing a major technological improvement project. And as part of that, we will be reworking this letter to ease any confusion. But generally speaking, this letter goes out as a first step to filing a court case for building code violations. Our building code violation cases for vacant buildings are all filed on what we commonly call the demolition call. However, a filing on that court call does not mean that's the remedy that we would be seeking. So there's all types of different remedies that we can pursue. And so that's what this letter is designed to do, is to put owners on notice that they need to secure their property, they need to abate dangerous conditions, they need to have it registered as a vacant building. And then we follow up internally with the law department to determine ownership and make a final decision on whether or not litigation is appropriate. I can also say that procedurally, if the Department of Buildings does find that a building is imminently dangerous and hazardous, and it is a landmark building, there are code provisions in our building code that address that, and there are procedures that we follow to notify landmarks when that happens. That did not happen in this case. Rather, this letter went out. We are conferring with our partners in the law department to see if litigation is beneficial in this case. But just to be clear, this letter does not mean that we're expecting a demolition. Moreover, when this letter goes out, if the owner elects to pursue demolition as a remedy, they still have to follow our permit process. So when you have a contributing building in a landmark district, there is an automatic hold on that property that prevents the Department of Buildings from issuing permits in error. In order for the applicant to be successful with this demolition application and to ultimately obtain a demolition permit, landmarks would have to make the decision to lift that hold and allow us to move forward. And as far as I know, that has not happened in this case.
Thank you, Judge. Commissioner Ferris, any other questions for UAB or if not, representative from Alderman Dowell's office? You can state your name and.
Thanks so much, Mr. Wall. My name is Brian Friedman. I'm with Third Ward Alderman Pat Dowell's office. She is supporting the department's recommendation to oppose the permit for demolition. Alderman Dowell has always supported historic preservation in her ward, and this is a contributing landmark building in a landmark district. She does not support tearing it down, as I said. She, as you might know, there's a memorial under consideration for the property. She's publicly committed to that memorial. But that's not the issue here. If the owner does bring it up, this has nothing to do with memorial. This is for the demo of the property and based on the qualifications that Ms. Barton said. She hopes that the owner would commit to memorialize the property, but also not to demolish the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the owner here? Is the applicant here? Would they like to make a statement? Owner applicant for this property? No, it's not. Okay. That being said, I'll call names for public comment. Oh, Brian, you raised.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Miller.
Yes, good afternoon once again, Commissioners. Ward Miller, Richard H. Treehouse, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We at Preservation Chicago support the city's preliminary decision on a former Fiat dealership designed by the very notable firm of Halliburton and Roche, one of Chicago's most prominent and most notable architectural firms. This is a wonderful building and a wonderful addition to the Motor Road District, and we'd like to see this building preserved, landmarked. I'm sorry, preserved. It already is landmarked, but become a contributing building back to the district with a beautiful renovation and avoid the demolition of the structure. We find this to be one of the most beautiful structures in the district designed by this prominent firm. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Nobody else has signed up to speak on this matter. Therefore, I'd like to request a motion to accept the staff recommendations. Oh, Commissioner Hughes, I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm curious, I know the owner isn't here, so you may not know, but what was the like purpose of them submitting it, like, what are they trying to do with the property?
I can speak on that if no one else wants to. Brian Friedman, Third Ward Alderman Pat Dowell's office, they wanted to put in a 21-story development on the property.
Thank you. That answers my question.
All right. That being said, I'd like to request a motion to accept the staff recommendation on the permanent application for demolition of 2347 South Michigan Avenue.
So
And moved by
Seconded.
Commissioner Ponce, second by Commissioner Dekowitz, Commissioner Boatwright,
yes.
Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate this motion. All right. Next item on the agenda is a preliminary landmark recommendation for Wax Tracks. Located at 2449 North Lincoln Avenue. This is in the 43rd Ward and Henry, all yours.
Where are the roads when you need them? Okay, so for your consideration today, is a preliminary landmark recommendation for Wax Tracks at 2449 North Lincoln Avenue. In 2022, the program committee received a suggestion to landmark this building, which housed the Wax Tracks record store from 1978 to 1993. The building is located on the east side of Lincoln Avenue, about a half block north of the intersection of Lincoln, Fullerton, and Halsted. That's in Lincoln Park, on Chicago's north side. Historic Preservation Division staff believe that Wax Tracks meets two criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for heritage. Life and business partners Jim Nash and Danny Flesher opened the Wax Tracks record store at 2449 North Lincoln Avenue in Chicago in 1978. They were music collectors who would travel anywhere to see a new band, and their shared passion for music inspired the Wax Tracks retail venture. Their personal tastes, creative generosity, and willingness to take risks shaped the store into an international source of eclectic and groundbreaking music. When they launched the Wax Tracks label from the store, the music which was created put Chicago on the world stage as the US city which birthed the new genre of industrial dance music. In the late 1970s and early 80s, records were sold by a few large national and regional chains, department stores, grocery stores, five and dimes, mail order record clubs, and the occasional independent retailer. With a few exceptions, the music sold at Wax Tracks was not the type of music that could be purchased at these retail outlets, whose bottom line demanded that they stock the music most likely to sell, namely what was heard on the radio or seen on TV. Nash and Flesher focused on specialty genres, offering a breadth and depth of these types of music that other retail outlets, with rare exception, did not. With bootlegs, imports, and hard-to-find records, cassettes, CDs, and videos, Wax Tracks became an international retail destination. The music reflected Nash and Flesher's tastes: select classic rock and roll and R&B, punk, new wave, glam, rockabilly, dance, power pop, psych pop, European synth pop, avant-garde, and other eclectic genre. Nash and Flesher sought out imports for sale, especially collectible pressing, including colored vinyl, picture disc, and deluxe versions. Obsessed with UK culture, they worked with other collectors who would fly to London to bring back the most recent releases, sometimes getting them before they even debuted in their home country. Many remained rare, never to be released in the United States. Nash and Flesher also made and sold bootlegs, which were illicitly recorded and released performances or compositions. One of the first they made in Chicago in 1979 was a 7-inch vinyl of Brian Eno proto-punk singles. The store could also be counted on to carry independent label releases, something absent from chains and other retailers. The store itself at 2449 North Lincoln proclaimed its purpose and energy from the moment you set foot inside. Music was playing loudly. Film clips and early videos played from TVs mounted on the walls. The walls were covered with promotional posters, memorabilia, band and concert photos, picture discs, and neon signage. Rows of record bins had hand-lettered and decorated dividers with band names or sections like New Arrivals to help guide buyers' curiosity. When Jim and Danny vacated the apartment on the second floor in the late 1980s, it was remodeled and turned into new sales space for the store. There they set up a boutique for clothing, accessories, and publications. Of course, music was the reason people came to the Wax Trax store, but for some, the clothing and accessories sold there were just as important. Distinct clothing was a statement, especially in the 1980s, where movements like punk and new wave came with their own aesthetics, and especially for teenagers wanting to establish their own identity. Wax Trax was the first to carry brands like Doc Martens, Trip New York City, and others, which have become staples of music-related fashion. Magazines on offer included not only music industry magazines, but fanzines, a type of fan-based journalism which focused primarily on non-mainstream music genres and bands. If you wanted one of these, Wax Trax was where you went. Using the store as their home base, Nash and Fletcher also helped to bring the world to Chicago by producing and promoting shows for cutting-edge fans. By 1980, Nash and Fletcher had paid to fly in cutting-edge bands like Bauhaus, The Cramps, New Order, and The Jam to Chicago for their first ever shows in the city. The Lincoln Avenue Wax Trax store opened at a time in America when society's pendulum was swinging away from earlier decades' idealism and freedom-focused liberation toward the new right and nostalgic conservatism of the Reagan years. All of that was left behind when you stepped into the store. Customers might be sporting mohawks or business suits, but they all were fans of the music being sold at Wax Trax. The power of music to overcome stereotypes and connect people was palpable at the store. Music was the common language, and you knew the people looking at the bins next to you spoke the same language as you. This type of acceptance was not always easy to find. To those who felt targeted or out of step with the new status quo, or those who felt like outsiders or outcasts, the Wax Trax record store provided a rare refuge. The store became a mecca and a meeting place for those most comfortable outside the mainstream. And more than one band has noted the friendships formed there were how their group started. This embrace included the LGBTQ+ community. Much of the music sold in the store and the artists who made it were free from the stereotypes and predefined expectations or expressions of sexuality and gender, as noted in a 2019 Chicago Tribune article. At a time in America when being labeled homosexual was generally considered at best an insult or a joke, if not justification for physical abuse or worse, this made the store a sort of safe zone for the LGBTQ community. Having pressed bootlegs, organized concerts, and procured difficult to find music from all manner of sources, it was not that much of a stretch for Nash and Fletcher to establish their own legitimate label. The nature of work needed to run the store meant they already had established relationships with distributors, manufacturers, venues, and musicians. Their first official label release in 1981 was done in response to being asked to record and make pressing for a local punk group called Strike Under. The plan was to sell the EP out of the store, so they only had a small number of records made, but the Wax Trax record label had been launched. For the second release, Jim Nash, a fan of John Waters' films, approached one of his stars, the female impersonator Divine, who up to that point had not released any records. Divine accepted this offer, and Wax Trax's second release was a single by Divine. The release was not expected to make much of a profit, But this was not how Nash and Fletcher chose to conduct the store or the label. They sold the music they liked, and they recorded the music they liked. Music that other companies would not take a chance on, just because they thought it should be heard. Now, Wax Trax made its way into the larger culture of the 1980s in Chicago, the nation, and beyond. Film director John Hughes, whose popular career included films Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, and 16 Candles, lived near Chicago and was a big fan of the Wax Trax store. It was there he first connected with many of the bands that would become staples of his soundtracks. And it was those soundtracks that opened many young listeners' ears to music that couldn't be heard on many radio stations at the time. Hughes even wanted to use the store for his 1986 Pretty in Pink movie, but timing didn't work out. Instead, Fletcher and Nash supplied Hughes with promotional materials to help recreate the store as a set in Hollywood. And these are, in fact, recreations, not Wax Trax. So witnessing these new developments was employee Frank Nardello, who was in the local band Special Effect with Al Jorgensen. Nardello gave his bosses a demo tape from his friend Jorgensen, who just put together the band Ministry. When the Wax Trax label released a 12-inch single in 1982 by Ministry called Cold Life, it became a hit in the dance clubs of Europe and made Billboard's Dance Disco Top 80 chart. Having kept their pulse on bands coming out of Europe, Nash and Fletcher next set their sights on a Belgian band called Front 242, whose records they'd been importing to sell at the store. They engineered a licensing agreement through the band's label to make and distribute their music in the United States. In 1983, the first record on the Wax Trax, their first record on the Wax Trax label, found success as a dance club hit. This was one of many licensing deals that Nash and Fletcher put together. The Wax Trax label was the first US company to release music by British band KLF, originally Chicago-based band TKK, KMFDM from Germany, Belgian group A Split Second, British groups including Coil, and out of Switzerland, the Young Gods. Though no two bands were alike, much of the success of Wax Trax music was due to its popularity in dance clubs, because the music relied on a prominent beat track underlying other instrumentation. Another through line was experimentation with electronics as the primary instruments for both melody and mood, often pushing sound to the limit of harshness as a reflection of the nihilism and absurdity at the philosophical core of the music. The result was a very machine-made or industrial sound, dubbed industrial music by journalists. And Wax Trax Records was seen as the primary label behind the development of this genre in the United States. The Wax Trax label used the back office at 2449 North Lincoln to oversee projects from inception to the final packaging and shipping of the product. When packages left the store, they always included a catalog of Wax Trax releases, and label ads encouraged people to write in for the catalog. This became an integral part of the business and allowed it to expand beyond just the cities where there were record stores that carried Wax Trax label releases. Rolling Stone used on the result in 1995. Wax Trax defined a subculture and created a following as strong as any of its individual artists. People would buy any record with the Wax Trax imprint music unheard, and the label often received fan mail of its own. Nash and Fletcher received these on a regular basis, and the letters often expressed the vital role that the records had played in people's lives. It was not uncommon for them to hear that Wax Trax releases were a lifeline to people who felt or were made to feel entirely alone in communities without a safe zone like the Wax Trax record store. The sense of identity and belonging that Wax Trax records provided went far beyond simple listening pleasure. The Wax Trax label had begun in the office of the Wax Trax store on Lincoln Avenue. By 1985, the label's sales had become big enough that new staff were needed and the office was moved to a building next door. The label prospered through the end of the decade, but financial problems began stacking up. Ultimately, it was the lack of contracts, part of Nash and Fletcher's family-style approach to their businesses, that allowed major labels to poach their artists, and this spelled the end of Wax Trax. The store on Lincoln Avenue had always been financially linked to the label, with Nash and Fletcher letting funds flow between them as needed to keep both businesses going. At the very time when the owners most needed the store's profits to bolster up the label, the music recording and retail landscape was transforming. Major labels now specifically sought out underground artists like those on the Wax Trax label. Meanwhile, new music stores came to Chicago that offered greater variety than before. And at the same time, chains like Circuit City, Best Buy, and Target competed for consumers by using their large-scale buying power to offer CDs at lower prices. In 1993, Nash and Flesher sold the store on Lincoln Avenue and reopened it. The arrival of the Wax Trax store in Chicago was monumental in terms of shaping Chicago's music scene and in shaping the world's perceptions of Chicago music from that point forward. In 1995, Chicago Tribune music critic Greg Kot put it this way: when Nash and Flesher arrived on Lincoln Avenue to open the Wax Trax record store in 1978, Chicago's music scene became hip again. Today, Chicago bands are celebrated worldwide for their cutting-edge cool, a renaissance that began when Nash and Flesher blew in 17 years ago. Jim Nash succumbed to complications from AIDS in 1995, and his daughter closed the Wax Trax store the following year. Without his partner of nearly 25 years, Flesher soon found he had no drive to continue the business. Eventually, he returned to Arkansas and a quieter life. He passed away in 2010 from pneumonia. Looking at the legacy of the store and the label Nash and Flesher had created, Richard Giraldi of the Chicago Sun-Times compared Wax Trax Records to another of Chicago's musical institutions. As important as Chess Records was to blues and soul music, Chicago's Wax Trax imprint was just as significant to the punk rock, new wave, and industrial genre. What began as a record shop on Lincoln Avenue that specialized in underground music more than 30 years ago morphed into an influential label and seeped into the city's culture. In 2010, Greg Kot of the Tribune summarized the music and the artists who made that happen. In the 80s, the store expanded into a label that became the world headquarters for boundary-pushing artists who bridged disco, electronic music, rock, and the avant-garde. Some dubbed the sound industrial disco, an umbrella term that included Ministry, Front 242, Underworld, KMFDM, and TKK, underground acts that went on to sell millions of records. Although there was more than one label that specialized in this type of music, Billboard magazine credits Wax Trax as, quote, the US label that put industrial dance music on the map in the 80s. Using a comparison to another of the United States' legendary labels which came to signify a genre, David Prince of Rolling Stone described Wax Trax Records as a virtual Motown of molten electronic dance music, which set the tone, aesthetic, and soundtrack for the 1980s Industrial Revolution and laid the groundwork for the success of later artists like Nine Inch Nails. Thank you.
I'm very sorry.
No problem, no problem. Staff also believe that Wax Trax meets criterion for exemplary architecture. Research has not uncovered the original permit records for the building. However, the earliest map of the area is an 1887 Rasher's Atlas, from when this portion of Lincoln Avenue was in the township of Lakeview. The map shows a two-story masonry building at the same location and with the same dimensions as the existing structure. The address at this time was 396 North Lincoln, and directories show it was occupied by a wallpaper and painting firm. The building's facade refronting with glazed brick is likely from circa 1900, when the building and the two properties to the north were acquired by Fred Strauss Dye Works. White glazed brick had become fashionable after the 1893 World's Columbian Exhibition in Chicago, nicknamed the White City for its architecture. This trend in architecture was adopted along the city's most vital commercial corridor, State Street, as a preferred cladding up until World War I. The Dye Works catered to clients in the garment and fashion industry, so refronting the property would have been a way to advertise their ability to keep up with what was stylish. And Chicago was also home to one of the nation's largest manufacturers of glazed brick, the Tiffany Enamel Brick Company. In 1910, it was announced that the Dye Works would construct a new larger plant at Schubert and Sheffield. After Strauss relocated, the building was acquired in 1911 by Harry P. Klassen, who operated an undertaking establishment. Historic Sanborn maps and obituaries indicate that the building housed a series of undertaking businesses until 1972. From 1972 to 1978, The building hosted Casa Bonafeather, a restaurant which specialized in cheese dishes. Nash and Fleischer chose to set up their store in the then economically transitioning Lincoln Park neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. After purchasing the building in 1983, Nash and Fleischer began to remove the drab green paint that had blanketed the facade to reveal the building's white and dark green glazed brick frontage. Though the glazed brick was likely an early 20th century upgrade, the building maintained its original pressed metal Renaissance Revival cornice of unusual size and ornamentation for this building type. It includes horizontal elements, a frieze and a cornice tied together with large curved brackets. Festive swags are set between the brackets. At the center of the cornice is a panel which identified the historic name of the building, now blank, topped with a broken pediment. The cornice is topped with 4 acroterion and an obelisk. All of these motifs are derived from Renaissance Revival architecture, which itself took inspiration from classical Greece and Rome. Between the first and second floors, the facade features 2 limestone belt courses with classical molding that frame a horizontal band of white glazed brick with green accents. Within this band are 3 carved mascarons depicting individual variations of smiling female faces and 2 cartouches rendered in carved limestone. Figurative ornaments like these mascarons are rarely found on a story flat building. In addition to the criteria just discussed, Historic Preservation Division staff believe that Wax Trax meets the separate integrity criterion. Nash and Fleischer built a rear addition which connected the front building to the existing garage at the rear, expanding the square footage of the store. Since that time, a new split-face concrete masonry 2.5-story rear addition with a front gable roof has been built. Windows and storefronts have been replaced, but this is expected with the building of this age. All of the additions have been done at the rear, so these all do not affect the structure's ability to convey its historic significance. The facade remains intact. Given that the building is not rated orange and is located in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, staff have concerns that the building could be demolished. After waiting a couple of years without any movement, staff felt the history of the site justified moving forward with this designation. After the building went up for sale back in 2022, staff contacted the owners via the real estate agent in 2023, asking to meet to discuss potential landmarking, but the owners did not respond. Staff again reached out in April of this year, and one of the owners said they were not interested in landmarking. Staff continued to request a meeting and communicate with them in July, and most recently in August, copies of which communications you have with you in front of you. And the second owner, in those communications, the second owner emailed recently, he's also not interested in landmarking designation. Alderman Knudsen Alderman Knudsen's staff have expressed his support. Copies of, and he has been asked for a letter to that effect. Staff recommend that the significant historical and architectural features are all exterior elevations and roof lines of the building. That concludes my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Does the commissioner have any questions of Ken?
Just a clarification, you had mentioned about some additions. Is that at the rear of the
Yeah.
building in question?
Sorry that I said that a little awkwardly. Everything is at the rear, and can't be seen from Lincoln Avenue. So it doesn't affect the look of the mass of the structure.
And, you know, in alignment with, you know, recommendation, that elevation is.
It would be included because we look at the entire envelope of the building. However, in this particular instance, it's that front facade that's the only finished facade, and a greater flexibility at what's even visible of the side elevations as possible, and definitely on the rear, which isn't visible to you know, anyone on Lincoln Avenue. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is the applicant?
I don't believe so. They did not indicate that they were here. Is that, have they decided to? I don't believe so, no.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'll go to the comments from the public. I did want to note, Steve Maglio has indicated that he's in favor, but does not wish to speak. There's several people signed up to speak. If you are repeating what other people have said, if you keep your comments short, would be much appreciated. So let me start with Logan Mounts. Oh, where are people speaking from? Oh, yes, please. That would be,
I think because the room's small enough, there's no mic, so if they
Okay.
can just stand up, that'd be
okay.
great.
Can I address you from the front?
Or yeah, you're welcome to do that. I can even move the podium. Sure.
And just as a reminder, there isn't really a rule.
Hello, Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Mark Skillicorn. My wife Julia Nash and I currently own Wax Trax Records. Wax Trax originally was a record and clothing store created by Julia's father, Jim Nash, and his partner, Danny Fletcher, and was located on Lincoln Avenue starting in 1978. I could talk to you today about how musician Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters bought his first punk rock t-shirt in this building, or I could talk to you about how Robert Plant would go to this building and request Rockstar discounts. I could talk to you today about how Wax Trax staff would walk director John Hughes through the stock, finding new artists for his movies such as Sixteen Candles, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I could even elaborate on how the Ramones said this was the best record that they'd ever seen. But what I would really rather talk to you about today is what this building meant and still means to everyday people who intentionally choose not to follow the mainstream or status quo. For context, in the 1970s and 80s, in the 1970s and 80s, you could get spit on, assaulted, harassed just for looking different or having a different way of thinking. The soccer mom with blue hair today is a direct result of the subculture of yesterday. And in Chicago, the subculture was developed, nurtured, and thrived at 2449 North Lincoln Avenue. Wax Trax unintentionally created a community in this building where people of all ethnicities, gender identities, political views, sexual orientations, cultural perspectives didn't have to hide or feel that they were outnumbered. They bonded through the self-expression, and this building became the embodiment of being yourself. What may have started out as the greatest record store ever seen quickly shifted into a place of safety and strength for so many of us who didn't have a traditional voice. For anyone who has felt marginalized, finally finding your people can be life-changing. When Wax Trax expanded and grew into the genre-defining record label, the Lincoln Avenue store became both an important magnet and beacon, or a magnet and transmitter through the label of music. Well, what we didn't fully understand at the time was that that same unapologetic and defiant spirit that worked at the store level became amplified as a record label. By directly reaching the kid in Nebraska who may have had gender questions, or the teenager in Texas who grew up in a strict religious household, or the punk in Florida who's just called a freak, Wax Trax wasn't just a window out, but more importantly, was a mere reflection, reassuring that everything would be okay. 45 years later, and we continue to receive letters stating, and to this day it's true, we get letters stating that Wax Trax wasn't just a record label to them, but it actually was a personal lifeline.
10 seconds.
We would like to submit a petition of signatures of nearly 10,000 of these lifelines, including pictures in which fans from all over the world have had a pilgrimage to the Lincoln Avenue store to express where important history happened, as well as where their cultural identity began. Similar to Chess Records or the Pilgrim Baptist Church or the recently landmarked warehouse in West Loop, And Wax Shack's buildings shares the rare distinction of creating a Chicago-born genre that transcends the building itself. Thank you for your time and consideration. And thank you for the people who.
Thank you. Staff, I'm sorry. What was your name?
Mark Skillicorn.
Thank you.
You can leave it, that's fine, thank you.
Logan Mounts.
Sir.
You wanna speak there?
Stay here, that's okay.
Stand up so that you heard.
Love to. I would not be here today without Wax Shack's records, quite literally, it's the culture that brought my parents together and the culture that they raised me on. I've seen how much Wax Shack has impacted the citizens of Chicago at things like the annual Cold Wave Festival and other Wax Shack events throughout the year, drawing thousands every time. I own over 100 Wax Shack releases and have dedicated countless hours and dollars to the brand that Mark and Julia have worked tirelessly to preserve. As someone who is too young to experience the original storefront, it is crucial that the Lincoln Avenue building receives the landmark status. For Mark and Julia, for Jim and Danny, for self-proclaimed Wax Shack fan Steve Albini, and for the city of Chicago that helped birth the worldwide recognized subculture. Thank you.
Meredith Barker.
That's me.
Jeff Kill, you missed. Okay.
Hi there, my name is Gala Barker, and I'm kind of a dying breed. I actually worked at Wax Tracks on Lincoln from 1980 to roughly 85, a little bit into 86 when I jumped Wax Tracks to go to law school and practice law. But I can attest to Wax Tracks being the magnetic north of the creative community during that period, especially for me between 80 and 85. And I ended up marrying one of the band members in the band ministry, to whom I was married for 34 years. And I met a lot of people at the store who met each other, joined bands, became visual artists for that community, and it was a real sense of community there. And I just recently moved back to Chicago, and I was really surprised that a section of Belmont Avenue now, I think the 2600 to 2800 block of Belmont is now known as Steve Albini Way. I knew Steve Albini when he came into Wax Tracks during that period of 80 to 84. And he was just another guy with a record collection who was spinning records and getting into the whole recording industry part of that. And he went on to record and produce bands like Nirvana and people like that. And Wax Tracks was, in fact, the cornerstone for a brand new genre of music, which was industrial rock. And I met a lot of people through that, through all those people intersecting the culture, becoming a big community. And bands like Nine Inch Nails, yes, appeared in the store, went on to huge fame. And I can also attest to the fact that a lot of that music is still being licensed and used for television and movies. So it would have a huge influence on culture at the time. And that section of Lincoln Avenue, including the Biograph Theater, looks so different now, except for little pieces of it, like the building where Wax Track was. And it was really disheartening to walk by there recently and see the monolith on the corner of Lincoln, Fullerton and Halsted, where there used to be just this little green space. And now it's this ugly whatever it is. But anyway, I also met Joe Shanahan at Wax Tracks, and as some of you may know, Joe Shanahan owns the music venue Metro and the G-Man Tavern next door. Both pretty important places. I did a reading there in February for a memoir that I published, and it kind of talks about relationships in the whole community and how it all worked. So these are all familiar names: Shanahan, Steve Albini, Smashing Pumpkins, Nine Inch Nails, Ministry, whatever. Everybody converged at Wax Tracks, and that's why that place is so important to preserve. And it is part of music history and part of Chicago history, and I'm born and raised in Chicago, and that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you.
So my name's Jeff Keel. I lived in Chicago my whole life. Unfortunately, did 2 years in Northwest Indiana, brought me right back here. So it was funny, I was sitting there listening to this presentation, and on the blue line down here from my house, I probably made 3 posts and then mentioned like 9 things that she mentioned. I don't even know what presentation that was gonna be. So to have so many common things with, you know, someone totally out of different place in life, you know, as my friends and coming down to Wax Tracks, you know, it just really, you know, hits home how unique it was. I even put out a fanzine, which they mentioned in the, was a place you can go get these, and got to interview Mark and Julia, and that's crazy, because like, as a kid, I did not make it to the store. Sorry, a little nervous here and I'm jacked up. But I drove down there when I finally got my license, didn't tell my parents I was driving from the suburbs. But it was closed. I had no idea. There was no internet. AOL, yeah, I logged on, but no websites or anything back there. So it's just crazy to see support from friends or random people here for that. Something that I was like, oh, maybe I'll be the only one to text my friend, you know, he's like, I'll come, because that's how we met. And yeah, so for someone to give a regular guy who just wants to promote Chicago music, you know, 2 huge pages of handwritten answers about, you know, just how the Wax Track was made all these people that seek me out at different genre shows. Hey, you got a new zine, you got a new zine. I've seen a few people open this new one and go, what the hell is Wax Tracks? And they're in their 20s, so they have no idea. But people that got gray in their beard and grab one of these, they're like, oh, Wax Track. It's like, I remember, I know. So it's weird to be a connector for that. And just being a fan of Chicago in general. I mean, this whole get up I have on is about Chicago, even our great Chicago Bulls. We got Wax Track here. So like, you know, it's a part of it. It's not, you know, it doesn't stand out on its own as much as it's a part of Chicago culture. So. All I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward Miller?
All right, yes, Ward Miller, Richard H. Streethouse, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. We very much support this preliminary landmark recommendation for Wax Track Records. This is really in the same vein as somebody else mentioned, as the Warehouse and Chess Records, sort of celebrating our music history here in Chicago. And this is a landmark for everybody. This is a landmark for, you know, sort of the common Joe or Joanne on the street. And that's really beautiful to see the commission and the city look at these kinds of buildings. And, you know, this is also honoring a legendary business. Even though the legendary business is no longer there, it sort of promotes its history. It brings about good planning initiatives, and it sets the record straight. Gives an idea of what this building was, what it represented, even to a new generation of people. So this is really an amazing day to see these buildings that really have these incredible histories that touch so many lives. I remember going to the Biograph Theater as a teenager and also going to Wax Tracks. So, you know, this is part of all of our lives, if you will, if you're of a certain age and you happen to live in a certain area of town, or we're drawn to one of these 2 businesses. And I'm glad to see them both being preserved side by side. Both would be landmarks. And it really does hold that section of Lincoln Avenue down that has changed so much in the last decade. It's a beautiful building on top of it. And it's just wonderful to see these little buildings get recognized for their histories in Chicago. So many of them are being lost at a rapid rate. And just last year, we recommended, we nominated Chicago's small terracotta buildings as a most endangered feature. And this building has some of those components to it. These are little structures that would otherwise just be lost. So it's wonderful to see this sort of music history protected, if you will, and its story remembered. And we look forward to this being a designated Chicago landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward. Here, okay, and then Josh.
Didn't expect to speak today, but I'm very passionate about Wax Trax as a label and an institution. I first went to this store in 1980 when I was 13. And I instantly felt that sense of, I feel I found my tribe. These are my people. I was more into the punk rock stuff, not the industrial music stuff until a few years later, but that's where everybody, like other people said, gathered. And it's become something that changed my life, literally, because I'm a professional DJ. I have been for 36 years. And I see the patrons at my events, which are 18 plus, and there are people who go there to hear Wax Trax and Wax Trax like music. Because Wax Trax, when people talk about it, often they don't mean just the bands that were on the label. It's become a sound. There's a Wax Trax sound. And the building itself has become as again someone mentioned, a pilgrimage place. I've been lucky to travel the world with my DJ career and with my band. And the moment people find out I'm from Chicago, invariably someone was like, "Oh, Wax Trax, I've been there, I want to go there." And people come to my club events that say, I came to Chicago not only to do whatever it was, but I had to go to Lincoln Avenue and see the building. And it's people from, I mean, they're young people I know in their early 20s, like I'm Jason over here, and then there's Joe, who's a little fart like me, and you know, it's that sense of community, and it's become not just subcultural, it's significant culturally now. It's these bands like Ministry fill stadiums. It's not just the little group of weirdos that we were in the early 80s or late 70s. It's definitely a place that deserves recognition and status. And that's all I have to say.
Josh, hi. Hey.
I guess I'll follow the trend and get up and speak, even though I really wanted to speak in the back, but. So my name is Josh Pyle. I am a resident of Printers Row in Chicago. So I actually live not too far from Motor Row, a lot of that. And I'll get back to that in a second. So first thing I'm gonna say is I was that teenager in Texas. I relocated here in 1991 for college. The first thing I did, excuse me, was go to Wax Trax with a friend of mine from California who became one of my best friends. So we made a pilgrimage immediately in 1991. It was an awesome experience. The label has that same overall influence, I would say, globally, not just like teenager in Texas, teenager in California. There are people all over the world. So that's one thing I want to mention about Motor Row. Man, it is, you guys are a crowd. I work at Google. And so the reason I want to bring up Google is that I had a coworker who came from Paris a few years ago, and he wanted to see Chess Records. He was wanting to go on a pilgrimage to Chess Records. So thankfully, the city of Chicago, I think deemed it a landmark in 1990, I believe. So you guys have a history doing good things. In the future, I think there's going to be a lot of people who want to continue to make landmark visits to Chicago for Wax Trax. So do consider it for the label, people, for the culture. Significant cultural influence cannot be overstated. It's already been done. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Nobody else has signed up to speak. Any further discussion with the commission?
I just have one clarification. Ms. Hans, you said that the owners don't want the building to be designated and have been now responsive. But then you said the applicant is not present. Who is the applicant?
I apologize, I must have misspoken. I meant that the owners There's too much, it's my permit review background, sorry. So it's the owners who are not present. There's no applicant here. The only thing we added in 2022 was the suggesters who are here today.
Any other questions?
So if the owner is going to contest the landmark nomination, just to kind of elaborate for people who don't do this all the time, what happens next?
So, so in the city of Chicago, owner consent is not required. And I have definitely shared that with the applicants and let them know about today, because I wanted them, you know, if at all possible, to hear this and for you to hear them. The next step, if you choose to vote a preliminary landmark recommendation, would be to request from the commissioner a statement for the Department of Planning and Development about how this landmarking does or does not fit in with city policy. Following that, we send out a request for consent to the owners. There's a time period that's outlined. If they say no, or if they do not respond, we hold a public hearing, which is a more detailed, focused opportunity for the owners to make their case about why they feel it should not be landmarked, why it doesn't meet the criteria, et cetera. After that's done, we will come back to the commission with that information for a potential final landmark recommendation, and then, you know, where it goes from there.
Okay, thanks for elaborating on it.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner Rubin. Any other questions or comments? Having none, I'd like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for Wax Tracks located at 2449 North Lincoln Avenue. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved, Oliver and Commissioner Rubin. What was that? Rubin seconded that. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Jenkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Boatright.
Yes.
Commissioner Fair.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Commissioner Ponce.
Absolutely.
And I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Welcome to the entertainment meeting. Next item is the permit review committee reports and Commissioner Jenkins. Where's yours?
The permit review committee reviewed and conducted 3 projects as July 11, 2024 meeting. The report summarizing the scope of the proposed project and the committee's decisions was included in your packets. This report is for your commission and for the rest.
Thank you, Emily.
For the month of July, staff approved 139 permit applications. A total of 168 reviews were performed by staff, and the average number of days to issue approval or corrections was
Really?
5.79.
You want to say that last sentence?
The average number of days to issue the approval or corrections was 5.38 days.
Thank you. All right, that's on the agenda. There being no further business, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right, anybody opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Jenkins. Time is- 2:15. Thank you.
Matt. We back on this one?
All about public hearings.